not me. And even further, he said, not only the blood be on your hands, but on your children's hands too. Put it down on to the children. And so Pilate is now, he's clearing himself out of everything. He said, well, what shall I do with this, which is called the Christ, this Jesus? And they said, let him be crucified. And so they took him on and they crucified Jesus. But before they crucified him, they took him and they planted a crown of thorns. Have you ever touched a thorn? I mean, it was these big old, not these little bitty thorns, those big thorns. You see those thorn trees? Can you imagine taking those thorns and wrapping them around and lacing them together and making a crown out of them? Well, they made a crown of thorns. Not just one thorn, but a crown. And then they set it on his head. And it probably was too small anyway. But then they pushed it down on his head. Can you imagine what thorns would do to your head when you push it down? The pain in the blood coming out. And not only that, but they took him and they beat him. And even before he went to the cross, they would do something that they would call a scourging, a flogging. Well, they would take this whip, and they would take little pieces of bone and metal, and they would make a whip out of it. And they would whip you until the flesh come off of your back. And they would whip them until they almost would faint. This is even before you get to the cross. And so they whipped him, and they beat him, and then they took him to the cross. And when he got to the cross, they got there and they gave him a reed in his hand. You know what a reed is? Reed is like a staff, like a scepter. And if y'all would have been with the Bible, then we would read Esther and how the king had the scepter and he had to extend it out before she could come in. I need to get one of them. See, he had to extend it out to his wife. She couldn't just come in and talk to him unless he accepted for her to come in. So they put one in his hand and they was making him as though he was, mocking him as being a king. You got the crown on your head. And then they put this scarlet robe on him and they put this reed in his hand saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." And then the Roman soldiers all got down and knelt down in front of him. But it was out of disrespect. All they were doing was mocking him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." And then they took him to the cross and they crucified him. But Jesus had already told them something before he went to the cross. He said, 3 days, I'll rise again. Destroy this temple. 3 days. And they didn't know what he was talking about. They said it took us 46 years to build this temple, showing them the building outside. But Jesus said, you destroy me. 3 days, I'll rise up again. And so they took him to the cross. And in verse number 45, he says, now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. In Roman and Jewish time, the 6th hour would have been 12 o'clock noon. And that's significant to what we're talking about. It would have been 12 o'clock. That's the 6th hour. And the 9th hour would be 3 o'clock. Do you remember when the day of Pentecost came and they were talking about how the apostles were speaking in tongues and they said that they were drunk and all of this here? They said, no, this was the 9th hour of the day. And it was early in the morning. So from the 6th hour, which was been 12 o'clock noon, that's when the sun is the brightest. And the sun is shining all over. But it said darkness came over the whole land from the 6th hour to the 9th hour. So the 9th hour would be, to us, be 3 o'clock. Well, I'll give you a little bit of history about the calendar. The Roman, the Jewish time, from the 6th hour to the 9th hour, 3 o'clock would be considered evening to the Jews. That's why when you go back in the Exodus and you read when they had to take the lamb and they were to slay the lamb, it said supposed to take him on the 14th day and to put him up until the evening, and then to kill him in the evening, because Jesus died in the evening. Just a little history for y'all, in case you didn't know that 6th hour to the 9th hour. But then Jesus, he cried and he gave up the ghost. And in verse number 50, when he had cried again with a loud voice, he yielded up the ghost. Verse 57, and I'll speed it up a little bit here. When the evening was come, there was a rich man, or Arimathea, named Joseph, who also himself was Jesus' disciple. So Joseph came and begged for the body to take it down off the cross. And they granted him permission to take the body. And what they do, they would take it and they would wrap it in white linen cloth and they would lay it in the tomb. Joseph was a rich man. And being a rich man, he had his own tomb. And he had it hewed out of a big rock. And that tomb was for him. But Jesus borrowed it for a little while. And so they took him and they laid him in there. But now here's watch this here. The Pharisees said, hey, look, you remember this man Jesus, what he said? He said in 3 days, he's going to get up again. So what we need to do is we need to set some guards out here after we roll this stone in front of it, and so that if he gets up, or if they come and they steal his body away, then they're going to say he was risen. Then they say it's going to be worse than before we crucified him. They're going to have a whole story saying, I told you he was Jesus. He got up and he's gone. So what they did was they took this cord and they would put a cord on one side and they put wax on it and they would put it on the other side with wax. And so if the cord was broken, you know that somebody had tampered with it and they had taken him out. But that's not what happened, is it? It says that an angel, now this is where we get over to our lesson. It took me all that long to get over here to where Brother Martin was. But anyhow, verse number 5, he said, and the angel answered, this is Matthew 28, and the angel answered and said unto the women, fear not ye, for I know that ye seek Jesus, which was crucified. The angel was saying, I know who you're looking for. You're looking for this Jesus whom they crucified. He said, but let me tell you something. He ain't here. He's gone. He has risen. So if you're looking for Jesus today, let me tell you something. Don't go looking among the dead. We serve a living God. You want to look for him, look among the living. Jesus is alive and well. And he left. And he's gone home to be with his Father. But you know what? I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. You see, whenever I close up the book, that means I'm about to finish. So we all know, I told you I was going to be real long. But Jesus, before he left, he made 3 promises before he left. One promise was he said, in 3 days, I will rise up again. And he fulfilled it. He rose again. And not only that, but he made another promise. He said, I will build my church. And he fulfilled that. He said, upon this rock I will build my church. And the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And he built his church. And he made another promise. This is an important promise. He said, if I go, I will come back and receive you unto myself. And where I am, there you may be also. So if he's coming back to get his church that he built, where all we need to be. That ain't real good grammar. we need to be. You know, it makes sense, don't it? If I tell you that I'm coming back to get my house